My mum ripped my medical records into shreds, her voice cutting through the room. "You're letting your sister die." My father spat venom, calling me a selfish mistake, dragging me toward the hospital doors. I felt like a prisoner in my own skin, my body treated as property, my life reduced to a sacrifice I never agreed to. Yet deep inside, something screamed, this wasn't the whole truth. And then the doctor leaned in, 6 words freezing time, unraveling everything I thought I knew about family. Words that made my mother collapse in her chair. From the outside, we looked like the perfect family. Neighbours waved at us when we drove out of our neat suburban house. And at Sunday church, everyone admired my sister Sophia's radiant smile. They said she was born to shine, a golden child blessed with everything: beauty, grace, intelligence. I was always there too, standing a few feet behind, but no one ever seemed to notice me. I was Natalie, the second daughter, the one who blended into the wallpaper. At dinner, laughter echoed through the dining room, bouncing off the crystal glasses and polished silverware. Father would raise his glass to Sophia's achievements, her scholarship, her piano recital, her glowing photograph on the community board. Everyone clapped, even Mother, who leaned forward with pride sparkling in her eyes. I smiled too, because that's what was expected of me. But inside, the noise was hollow. The camera, if there had been one, would have zoomed past the smiling faces and landed on mine. The smile stretched thin, eyes quietly drowning. The walls of the dining room told their own story. Family photos lined them like trophies, snapshots of vacations, graduations, holidays. Sophia's face appeared in all of them, perfect and shining. In the photo of her graduation, she stood in cap and gown with Mother and Father beside her. My picture from the same ceremony had once hung there too, but I noticed one evening it was gone, replaced with another portrait of Sophia. Later, I found it in the bottom of a drawer, the frame cracked, my face half torn from the corner. I kept quiet. That was what I always did. Keep quiet, keep the peace. Keep smiling so no one would see how invisible I truly was. But sometimes I could feel it, the look in Mother's eyes. At church, she would drape her arm around Sophia's shoulders, praising her to everyone who walked by. But when her gaze shifted to me, just for a flicker of a second, I caught something colder, sharper. A glint of disdain she didn't bother to hide. I swallowed hard and lowered my head, pretending not to notice. Pretending I wasn't already breaking. It was a Tuesday night when the first crack split open. We were sitting in the living room, Sophia showing Mother her latest essay for school. Mother beamed, clasping her hands as though she'd been handed a masterpiece. "You're extraordinary, Sophia. You always make us proud." Then her eyes flicked to me, and without a pause she added, "I just wish Natalie could be half as talented as you." The words burned, my chest tightened, and before I could stop myself, I whispered, "That's not fair, Mom. I try. You never notice." Mother's smile didn't falter. She tilted her head almost sweetly and replied, "Natalie, you're imagining things again. I love you both equally. Don't be so sensitive." Her voice was gentle, but her eyes sliced like knives. Gaslighting wrapped around me like barbed wire. Had I really imagined it? Had I misunderstood? For a moment, doubt crushed me deeper than the insult itself. I thought the conversation was over, but later that night, Mother entered my room. She sat on the edge of my bed, stroking my hair, her face soft and almost angelic. "You know I love you, don't you?" she whispered. I nodded, even though my throat burned. Her hand lingered, then her tone hardened, sharp enough to pierce the dark. "But you need to understand, Natalie. Sometimes your very existence is a burden. Don't make me regret raising you." The air left my lungs. I stayed silent, frozen, while she kissed my forehead and left. I wanted to scream. Instead, I buried my face in the pillow, clutching it until my knuckles turned white. I couldn't decide what hurt more, the rare taste of her tenderness or the cruelty that always followed right behind. Days passed. I learned to push the memory down, the way I always did. But something inside me had shifted. I began noticing details I'd ignored before, little inconsistencies, locked drawers, whispers cut off when I walked into the room. And one night, unable to sleep, I found myself wandering into the attic where boxes of old family things were kept. Dust clung to the air, making me cough, but something pulled me deeper into the shadows. There, in a box marked Family Records, I found a small folder tucked beneath yellowed photo albums. My name was scrawled on it in red marker. Hands trembling, I pulled it out. Inside were medical forms, hospital letters, test results. But what made my breath hitch wasn't the content. It was the thick red line drawn across my name on every page. As though someone had decided I didn't exist. I sat frozen, papers scattered across my lap, heart pounding so hard I thought it would echo through the attic. Why were my records hidden here? Why was my name crossed out, erased like I was never meant to be part of the family at all? I stared at the folder, dread crawling up my spine, until I heard footsteps on the stairs below. Quickly, I shoved the papers back into the box and pushed it deep into the shadows. My pulse thudded in my ears as the attic door creaked open. Mother's voice floated up, sweet and casual. "Natalie, what are you doing up there?" I forced myself to smile when she appeared at the top of the stairs. "Just looking through old photos," I lied, hiding my shaking hands behind my back. She looked at me for a long moment, her eyes narrowing ever so slightly, and then that glint again, sharp, cold, unmistakable. I smiled harder, pretending not to notice, but inside I knew. Something about my life was terribly wrong, and I wasn't imagining it this time. It began subtly, though now I can see the pattern was laid out long before I ever understood. I was never meant to be my own person. My parents had carved a role for me from the moment I was born, and it wasn't daughter or sister, it was spare part. At first, they wrapped it in guilt. Mother's eyes would water at the dinner table, and she would reach for my hand, as if the gesture could bind me. "Natalie, you have such a strong body," she whispered once. "God gave you strength so you can help Sophia. Without you, she won't make it." I stared at her, trying to process. "What are you talking about?" Father didn't sugarcoat it. He leaned back in his chair, his jaw clenched. "You've lived this long for a reason. Your life is to save your sisters. Don't forget that." The words slammed into me, leaving me breathless. My fork slipped from my hand, clattering against the plate. My life... What? But neither of them explained further. They just looked at me like I should already know, like my fate had been carved into my skin at birth. Later that night, I found myself pacing in my room, heart hammering. Could they really mean it? Could my existence really have been reduced to keeping Sophia alive? The next day, Mother staged a performance worthy of an audience. She walked into my room, tears already flowing, clutching her chest as though grief had shattered her. She fell to her knees in front of me, arms wrapping around my waist. "Please, Natalie, please, your sister doesn't have time. If you don't help her, she will die, and I'll lose my baby girl. Do you want me to lose her? Do you want to kill your sister?" Her words stabbed deeper than any knife. My throat closed. I don't want anyone to die, but why me? Why only me? She sobbed harder, pressing her wet face into my stomach, rocking me as though I were the parent and she the desperate child. "Because you're the only one who can. Don't be cruel, Natalie. Don't let her die when you can save her." I stood stiff, caught between rage and guilt, between the urge to push her away and the crushing weight of her words. And then, as if on cue, Sophia walked past the doorway, her lips curling into a smirk. In the days that followed, her cruelty sharpened. She called me names under her breath, loud enough for me to hear. Parasite, waste of space, selfish little leech. When I snapped at her once, she laughed, eyes glinting with triumph. "Everyone knows you're nothing without me. Your only value is saving me. Why fight it?" Every mistake in the house, forgotten chores, misplaced bills, even a broken glass, was pinned on me. "Natalie, you're so careless," Father barked. "Why can't you take responsibility for once?" I became the scapegoat, the vessel to carry the weight of the family's sins. And the more they piled on, the more I began to crumble inside. Still, a whisper in the back of my mind wouldn't die. Something about all of this felt too orchestrated, too calculated. Why did they act as if I was born for this role? Why did Sophia act like she owned me? That whisper turned into suspicion one afternoon at the hospital. Sophia had been admitted again for complications, and Mother forced me to come along. As I stood in the corridor, a familiar voice called my name. "Nat," I turned, startled. It was Aaron, an old friend from school, now wearing a white coat and a badge clipped to his chest. His expression softened with recognition. "It's been years." I smiled weakly, relief flooding me just to see a friendly face. "Aaron, I didn't know you worked here." We exchanged a few words before his eyes darted toward the folder, clutched in Mother's hand. His smile faltered. He leaned closer, lowering his voice until it was barely a whisper. "Natalie, your file. It's been altered." I froze. "What do you mean?" But before he could answer, Mother appeared at my side, her hand curling possessively around my arm. "Come along, Natalie," she said sweetly, eyes sharp as glass. "Sophia needs us." Aaron hesitated, then looked away, leaving me with more questions than answers. That night, Sophia's venom intensified. She cornered me in the hallway, her face pale but twisted with contempt. "Do you like all the attention you're getting now? Don't fool yourself. You're not special. You're just my backup plan." I clenched my fists, the words ricocheting in my skull. "You're sick. You've always hated me." She leaned closer, her breath hot against my face. "I don't hate you. I just know what you are. And soon, everyone else will too." Her laughter echoed after she left, leaving me trembling. I lay awake in bed, staring at the ceiling, my chest heavy. The walls seemed to close in tighter every night, suffocating me with the weight of secrets I couldn't touch. Days blurred into nights until Mother finally cornered me again, her face a mask of desperation. She shoved a paper into my hands, the black letters glaring up at me. Organ donation consent form. Her grip tightened around my wrist. "Sign it, Natalie. Sign it now." My voice cracked. "I don't understand. Why me?" Her lips curled into a smile that didn't reach her eyes. She leaned in close, her whisper a blade against my skin. "Because, my darling, you have no choice." The morning it all broke apart, the sky was heavy with clouds, pressing low over the house like a curse. I had barely slept when Mother stormed into my room, a folder clutched in her hands. Her face was pale, but her eyes burned with fury. Without warning, she ripped the folder open, yanking out the hospital documents I had hidden beneath my mattress. "You selfish girl," she screamed, her voice cracking. "You would rather see your sister die than give a piece of yourself?" I stumbled to my feet, my heart hammering. "Those are my records. You had no right." Before I could finish, she tore the pages in half, the sound of paper ripping like a gunshot. "You want Sophia to die? Is that what you want? Her blood will be on your hands." Father appeared in the doorway, his face twisted in disgust. "I should never have let you live," he spat. "You are the most selfish mistake of my life." His words struck harder than any blow. I had always known I wasn't enough, but to hear it spoken aloud left me hollow. I tried to speak, to beg them to listen, but they were beyond reason. Father grabbed my arm, his grip bruising, dragging me down the hallway as Mother trailed behind, shrieking accusations. By the time we reached the car, I was sobbing silently, the sound caught in my throat. They shoved me into the back seat, and the doors slammed shut like prison gates. I stared out the window as the suburban streets blurred by, every house we passed looking warmer and safer than my own. At the hospital, the sterile smell hit me like a wave. White walls stretched endlessly, gleaming under the harsh lights. Father's grip on my arm didn't loosen until we reached the surgical ward. My chest was tight, my vision swimming. In the corridor, a doctor approached, his face unreadable. He looked at me, then at the papers in Father's hand, and for the briefest second, he shook his head almost imperceptibly. My breath caught. What did that mean? But before I could ask, Father pushed me forward, barking, "Get her ready!" They stripped me of my clothes, of my dignity, replacing them with a thin hospital gown. As I lay on the gurney, the ceiling lights flickered past above me, each one a countdown to the end. My hands trembled, clutching the edges of the sheets. In the operating room, the metallic scent of disinfectant mixed with the hum of machines. Nurses moved around me, their faces blurred. The cold metal of the table seeped into my bones as I was strapped down, my throat tightened. "I don't want this," I whispered. "Please, I can't do this." No one listened. Father's voice echoed in my memory. Selfish mistake. Mother's sobs replayed in my ears. "Do you want your sister to die?" The anesthesia mask hovered over my face. I broke. Tears spilled, my voice shattering. Maybe they're right. Maybe I'm worthless. Maybe I was only ever meant for this. The nurse hesitated, but the doctor held up a hand. He leaned closer, his eyes piercing mine. For a long moment he just looked at me, as if weighing a decision. Then, in a low voice meant only for me, he said 6 words that froze the world still. "She's not your biological sister." The air vanished from my lungs. My mind spun, words slipping away. The walls of the operating room blurred, the sound of machines drowned by the thunder of my own heartbeat. What My voice cracked, too weak to carry, but he didn't repeat it. He straightened, his expression unreadable, while the staff around us continued preparing as if nothing had changed. The mask descended toward my face. My vision tunneled, the edges darkening. My chest rose and fell in sharp bursts as I tried to comprehend. Not my sister? Then who was she to me? Why had I been forced to carry this burden? The lights above me pulsed in rhythm with my racing heart. Thump, 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 louder, faster, drowning everything else. And then, as the darkness surged up to claim me, the sound of my own heartbeat was the last thing I heard. When I woke, I thought the words had been a dream. But they echoed in my skull with the sharpness of broken glass. She's not your biological sister. The fluorescent lights above flickered, and the beeping of machines pulled me back into reality. I was alive, still on the hospital bed, but everything had changed. For hours I lay in silence, replaying the doctor's whisper. Sophia was not my sister. Then why had my entire existence been tethered to her survival? The betrayal sank into me like poison. My chest tightened, not from fear this time, but from a rage so pure it left me trembling. Every insult, every shove into the shadows, every time Mother told me I was less, unworthy, replaceable, it all made sense now. They had lied. They had built my entire life on a foundation of deceit, grooming me to believe I was only valuable as a sacrifice. My eyes burned, but no tears came. The grief had calcified into something else. "I'm done," I whispered to the empty room. "I won't be their puppet anymore." When the nurse came to check my vitals, she handed me an envelope the doctor had slipped into my chart. My hands shook as I opened it. Inside were pages of test results, black ink glaring against the paper, and then I saw it. Paternity test results. My knees went weak. The man who had called me a mistake, who had spat on my existence, wasn't my father at all. The room tilted, the walls closing in. For a moment, despair clawed at me again. I wanted to scream, to tear the papers apart, to erase the truth, but I couldn't, because in that moment, clarity struck. They weren't my chains anymore. They had no claim to me if the bloodline itself was a lie. That realization sparked something feral inside me. For the first time in my life, I felt fire instead of fear. I was no longer the quiet shadow they controlled. My rage was no longer weakness, it was fuel. I slipped the documents into my bag, hiding them beneath my clothes. From then on, I began to collect every fragment of truth they tried to bury. In the trash at home, I found shredded pieces of the medical forms Mother had torn. I stayed up nights, piecing them together like a puzzle, each jagged scrap another weapon in my arsenal. I went back to the attic, searching through the boxes. In a rusted tin at the bottom, I found letters from the hospital dated years ago, mentioning treatments for Sophia that aligned eerily with the timeline of my own checkups. They hadn't been monitoring me for my health. They had been conditioning me for this moment. I started keeping a journal, recording everything I remembered, every cruel word, every manipulation, every threat. If they ever tried to erase me again, the truth would remain carved into ink. But gathering evidence wasn't enough. My hands still trembled too often. My chest still tightened with panic when I heard Mother's footsteps. I needed more than rage. I needed allies. So I found a therapist, one who specialized in family trauma. At first, I sat in silence on the couch, staring at the floor. But as the weeks went on, words spilled out, jagged and raw. They treated me like a tool, like I was never human. My therapist nodded, steady as stone. "Natalie, Abuse thrives in silence. Speaking it aloud is the first step toward freedom. I reached out to Aaron, the doctor who had warned me. We met in secret at a quiet cafe far from the hospital. He slid a folder across the table, his voice low. I couldn't say more that day, but I've seen your records. They've been altered multiple times. It's deliberate. My stomach churned, but I held his gaze. Then I need proof. I need everything you can find. He hesitated, then nodded. I'll help you. But Natalie, once this comes out, nothing will ever be the same. I also contacted a lawyer, one recommended by my therapist's support group. Sitting in the sterile office, I felt small, like a child again. But when I laid the documents on the table, my voice was steady. I want to expose them, all of it. The lawyer flipped through the papers, his brow furrowing. After a long pause, he looked up, his expression grave. Natalie, this isn't just a family dispute. This is a system of abuse, of fraud, of manipulation. If you go forward, this will destroy them. A chill slid down my spine. Good, I whispered. He leaned closer, his voice barely above a whisper. Natalie, this story will annihilate your entire family. The words hung in the air like a death sentence and a promise all at once. I pressed the folder closer to my chest, my heartbeat steady for the first time in years. For so long I had lived in chains of guilt and fear. Now I held the keys, and I was ready to use them. The night of the family gathering arrived cloaked in false warmth. The house gleamed as it always had, polished floors shining under chandeliers, laughter drifting from the dining room. Relatives filled the space with chatter, their voices weaving a familiar song of admiration for Sophia. She basked in it, smiling sweetly as if the universe revolved around her. My parents stood tall at her side, the picture of parental pride. I stood in the corner clutching a folder so tightly my knuckles whitened. My pulse pounded in my ears, but I forced myself forward. This was it. The moment I had prepared for. No more silence, no more lies. As dessert was served, I rose from my seat. I have something to share. My voice cut through the clatter of forks and chatter. Dozens of eyes turned to me. Mother's smile froze. Natalie, sit down. Don't make a scene. But I shook my head. A scene is long overdue. I laid the folder on the table, spreading the papers out for all to see. Hospital records, DNA results, paternity tests, each one a blade slicing through the carefully woven fabric of deceit. Gasps erupted around the table, chairs scraped against the floor. My uncle leaned closer, squinting at the bold letters that screamed the truth. Sophia is not biologically related to Natalie. Another page. Father is not the biological parent. Mother's face drained of colour. She collapsed into her chair, clutching the armrest, her breath ragged. Father sat rigid, his eyes wide, his jaw locked. For once, his mouth offered no cruel words. Sophia shot to her feet, her face twisted with rage. Lies! All lies! She's making this up because she's jealous. But the room was no longer hers. A murmur spread among the relatives. Confusion turning into suspicion. Suspicion into anger. The perfect mask was slipping. You've all been fooled, I said, my voice shaking but growing stronger. I was never a daughter. I was a tool. They lied about who I was, hid records, altered files. They told me my only purpose was to give Sophia my liver. And none of you ever questioned why I was always the one left in the shadows. The silence that followed was deafening. Then, from the far end of the table, a cousin rose to his feet. His face was pale, his lips pressed thin. "I knew," he said quietly. All eyes turned to him. His hands shook as he gripped the back of his chair. "I knew something wasn't right. Years ago, I saw the hospital letters. But I was scared to stand against them." He looked at me, guilt heavy in his eyes. "I'm sorry, Natalie." The room erupted. Relatives demanded answers, their voices overlapping. Mother buried her face in her hands, rocking in her seat. Father stared at the documents, his mask of control crumbling. Sophia screamed, her voice hoarse. "You're all turning against me. I'm the victim. I'm the one dying." But no one rushed to her side this time. The golden family portrait shattered before everyone's eyes. The perfect daughter was revealed as cruel and entitled. The proud parents were exposed as liars and manipulators. The whispers grew louder. How could they? All these years? Poor Natalie. I stood still amidst the chaos, my chest rising and falling in steady rhythm. For the first time, I wasn't invisible. For the first time, they saw me. Sophia lunged at me, her face twisted with fury, but relatives pulled her back. She kicked and screamed, cursing my name, while Mother sobbed and Father remained frozen in silence. In that storm of betrayal and unravelling facades, I inhaled deeply. The air was sharp, clean, alive. It was the first real breath of my life. The gathering broke apart in disarray. Some stormed out, others lingered in hushed groups, casting pitying glances at me, disgusted ones at my parents. By the end of the night, the house that had always felt suffocating reeked of ruin. The empire they had built on lies was gone. Days later, the fallout spread beyond those walls. My parents' reputation crumbled in the community. The people who once praised them now whispered behind their backs. Sophia found herself abandoned, her friends vanishing one by one. The golden pedestal she had stood on for so long dissolved beneath her feet. I watched it all unfold, not with malice, but with a strange, quiet relief. They no longer had a scapegoat, without me to bear their sins. Their carefully constructed world collapsed under its own weight. And me? I was free. One evening, as I sat on my porch with the fading sunlight painting the sky, the mailman stopped by. Among the bills and flyers was a plain envelope with no return address. My name was written across it in a careful hand. I opened it slowly, my heart thudding. Inside was a single letter. The words were simple, but they stole my breath. "Natalie, I am your real mother. Please let me explain." The storm had passed, but its wreckage remained scattered in every corner of my family's world. The truth, once caged, now walked freely through whispers, headlines, and the cold eyes of neighbours who no longer looked at my parents with admiration but with disgust. The perfect facade had rotted, and everyone could finally smell the decay. Relatives who once ignored my existence now called me with trembling voices, apologising for their silence, for their cowardice. "We should have defended you, Natalie," one aunt confessed. "We saw the way they treated you, but we thought it wasn't our place." Her guilt hung heavy, but I no longer craved their approval. I had outgrown the need to be believed. The community that had once bowed to Sophia's smile now whispered her name with pity and contempt. Entitled, cruel, manipulated by lies. She had gone from golden child to pariah almost overnight. My parents, once pillars of the neighbourhood, hid behind drawn curtains. unable to step outside without facing the venom of truth spat back at them. Justice hadn't come through a court or a gavel. It had come naturally, as it always does when the lies are too heavy to carry. The liars collapsed beneath the weight of their own deceit. Then, one morning, the phone rang. It was Aaron, his voice measured. "Natalie, the hospital has reviewed Sophia's case. They discovered inconsistencies, falsified files. She's no longer eligible for a transplant." The world went still around me. My breath came slowly, as if my body was deciding how to process this. "So, she can't use me anymore?" "She can't use anyone," he said softly. "The system caught up with her, with them." I hung up, staring out the window. A strange calm spread through me. Not joy, not vengeance, but release. The cage had not only broken open, it had crumbled into dust. Yet freedom was not just the absence of chains. It was the presence of something new, something real. I began building that life piece by piece. I moved out of the house that had been my prison and into a small apartment overlooking the city skyline. It was modest, but it was mine. I decorated it with colours I loved, filled it with books and plants, and for the first time I woke each morning without dread coiled in my stomach. I leaned into therapy, peeling back the layers of pain, rediscovering who I was beneath the scars. I joined a support group for survivors of family abuse. There, in a circle of strangers who somehow knew my soul, I found kinship. We shared our stories, our broken pieces, and slowly those fragments began to resemble something whole again. I wasn't alone anymore. Friends became my chosen family. People who loved without conditions, who saw me not as a vessel, but as Natalie. We celebrated birthdays, shared meals, laughed until our stomachs hurt. In their presence, I finally learned what family was supposed to feel like. But healing carried with it a responsibility. I couldn't ignore the others, still trapped in their own golden cages. So I began to write. Late nights at my kitchen table, I poured my story onto paper. Every manipulation, every betrayal, every small spark of resistance. It wasn't easy. Some nights I shook too hard to type, tears blurring the words, but I kept going. Because somewhere out there, someone needed to know they weren't alone. I started speaking at community centres, then at conferences. My voice trembled at first, but it grew steadier each time. Abuse hides in plain sight, I told audiences. It wears the mask of family, but love doesn't demand sacrifice at the cost of your soul. People cried, people clapped, and some came to me afterward whispering, that was my story too. The past no longer defined me. It became fuel for something greater. One evening, as I returned home, I saw the letter again. The one that had arrived at the end of the reckoning. I hadn't opened it fully. My hands shook as I finally tore it open. The handwriting was delicate, trembling with age. "Natalie, my daughter, I have searched for you all my life. You were never abandoned. You were stolen from me, switched at birth. I fought to find you, but I was told you died. Only recently did the truth reach me. You were never theirs. You were always mine." The paper slipped from my fingers as the words burned into me. Stolen, switched. Not unwanted, but stolen. Tears streamed down my face, not from pain this time, but from a healing so deep it almost hurt. For the first time, I understood my story had never been about being disposable. It was about being reclaimed. I was not a mistake. I was not a shadow. I was Natalie, and I was free.